I still remember the exact way the light hit her face when I asked the question that blew our life apart. It was a Tuesday night. Ordinary, quiet, boring even. The kind of night where nothing dramatic is supposed to happen. The TV was on mute, a crime documentary flashing images neither of us was really watching. The only sound in the living room was the soft ticking of the clock on the wall, and the occasional clink of her spoon against the mug as she stirred her tea. She sat on the far end of the couch, legs crossed, phone upside down beside her like always. Calm, composed. That same unreadable expression she had perfected over the years. My wife. The woman I thought I knew. I watched her for a few seconds, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. There's a special kind of fear that comes right before you ask a question you can't take back. A question you know will change everything. I was there right at the edge of that cliff. Who is Daniel? Her spoon stopped mid-circle. The tea kept spinning, but she didn't. She didn't flinch. She didn't jerk her head up. She didn't drop the spoon or gasp or give me that guilty, wide-eyed look you see in movies. Instead, she blinked slowly, almost bored, and then lifted her eyes to meet mine with this calm, icy curiosity. Daniel who? She asked, just like that, flat, controlled, like she was asking what time it was. And in that moment, I realized something I'd never wanted to admit. She had rehearsed this. Maybe not the exact name, maybe not the exact situation, but she had rehearsed being confronted. She had practiced that tone, that expression. She was ready for this long before I was. Don't do that, I said quietly. My voice sounded alien, like it belonged to someone else. Please don't pretend. Not now. The ticking clock suddenly sounded like a hammer. She set the mug down on the coffee table with surgical precision and folded her hands in her lap. The silence stretched like a rubber band. I could feel reality bending. Where did you hear that name? She asked. Not who is that? Not what are you talking about? Not you're scaring me. Just, where did you hear that name? If you've ever had that moment where your stomach drops and every puzzle piece you've been trying not to look at finally locks into place, you know exactly what I felt. It was like falling and seeing the ground coming but being unable to stop it. I swallowed. From your email, I said. The one you forgot to log out of. Her jaw tightened for half a second. Tiny. Almost invisible. But I saw it. She breathed in slowly and then leaned back, like we just moved from small talk to a serious business meeting. So you went through my email, she said. No panic. No outrage. Just strategy. I didn't go through anything, I said. You left your laptop open. His name was literally in the subject line. Hotel confirmation D&L. And then the second email. Can't wait to see you again. My voice cracked on that last word. Again. I could feel my hands shaking, so I dug my fingers into my knees to steady myself. She stared at me for a long time. I tried to read her face, but it was like always, smooth, distant, almost serene, cold, calculated. The kind of calm you only get when you've been lying for so long that it becomes muscle memory. Okay, she said finally. Then let's talk. And just like that, the floor of my life opened. Before I tell you what she said next, I need you to understand something. People think you just suddenly discover infidelity. That it's one big shock, one single moment where everything explodes. But most of the time, the explosion is just the final echo of 1,000 tiny warnings you ignored. Looking back, the truth had been knocking on my door for years. I just kept turning up the TV. If you're watching this and you've ever had that quiet, gnawing feeling that something is off with the person you love, don't brush it aside as quickly as I did. Stay with me to the end of this story. You might recognize more than you want to admit. And if my story helps you feel less crazy, less alone, then maybe consider sticking around this channel. No one should walk through this kind of darkness thinking they're the only one. The first sign came long before the name Daniel ever entered my life. It started with her eyes. We'd been married for 7 years. Not perfect, but stable. Or at least that's what I told myself. We had routines. Friday night takeout. Sunday morning coffee. Inside jokes about annoying neighbors. A shared playlist for long drives. From the outside, we looked fine. But at some point, her eyes stopped landing on me the same way. I noticed it one night when we were sitting at the same table we had picked together at the furniture store. I was telling her about something that happened at work. A client who had given me a hard time. Normally she'd jump in with questions, sarcastic comments, little jabs to make me laugh. That night, she nodded at the right moments. She said at the right places, but her eyes were somewhere else, watching me but not seeing me, focused and yet distant. It was subtle, so subtle that if I had been more distracted, I probably wouldn't have noticed. But for some reason, that night, it hit me like a whisper that wouldn't leave. She's here, but she's not here. A few weeks later, the second sign came. Her phone. She had always been private, but not secretive. There's a difference. We didn't go through each other's phones, but if it buzzed and she was in the shower, she'd shout, "Can you see who it is?" And I'd check. It wasn't a big deal. Her voice was calm, but her eyes weren't. There was this split-second flash, fear maybe, before she masked it. I froze. "Okay," I said, stepped back, and pretended not to notice. But it felt like someone had opened a window in winter and the cold had seeped in. After that, the phone was never left alone again. It became her second skin. Always face down. Always locked. Always within reach. Always with that quiet, coiled tension in her shoulders whenever it buzzed. I told myself, she's just stressed. Work is intense. She's tired. It's incredible how quickly you can become your own defense lawyer when you don't want to see the truth. You learn to throw excuses over the red flags like blankets. The third sign was the smell. You wouldn't think smell would betray a double life, but it does. She started coming home late. First, it was once a week. Then twice. Then 3 times. Meetings ran long. Had to stay and finish a project. We went out for drinks with the team. You should come next time. I wanted to trust her. I really did. But one night, she came in around 11, and I hugged her out of habit, relief and worry tangled together. And there it was. A scent that wasn't ours. Not our laundry detergent. Not her perfume. Not our bedroom or our car. Something else. Faint but clear. A blend of cologne and cheap hotel soap. The kind of smell you remember without wanting to. I pulled back a little slower than usual. "You smell different," I said, trying to keep my tone light. "New perfume." She smiled. That small, tight smile she used when she was annoyed but didn't want to show it. "Yeah," she said. "A coworker let me try hers. Do you like it?" She walked past me, dropped her bag, and went straight to the shower without waiting for my answer. I stood there, feeling stupid for noticing and even more stupid for saying anything. So I did what I always did back then. I shrugged it off and forced myself to believe the easiest explanation. If any of this is hitting too close to home for you, I get it. That war between what you see and what you want to see is exhausting. You're not paranoid. You're trying to survive the idea that the person you sleep next to might be a stranger. If you've ever felt like that, you're exactly the kind of person I made this channel for. But I didn't know that then. I was still clinging to the version of her I'd married. The version that made me believe we were a team. Then things got stranger. She started becoming efficient with affection. Quick kisses. Short hugs. Everything timed and measured. If I reached for her in bed, sometimes she'd pull away slowly and murmur, "I'm tired. Not tonight." Not rude. Not cold. Just unavailable. It's hard to explain, but it felt like trying to hug a ghost. Like the shape was there, but the weight was gone. I started asking myself quiet questions in the shower, where the water could drown them out. Is she bored of me? Did I do something wrong? Am I overreacting? We talked less. We argued more, but not about the real things. About dishes. About schedules. About nothing. The kind of arguments that are safe because they keep you from touching the bomb buried under the floor. Then, one night, I saw something I couldn't explain away. She was in the kitchen, back turned, chopping vegetables. Her phone lit up on the counter next to her. I wasn't trying to snoop. I was literally just walking past. But my eyes caught the notification. "See you Friday. Same place. Can't wait. D." She moved so fast to flip the phone over that the knife nearly slipped from her hand. Time slowed. "Who's D?" I asked, my voice sounding too calm even to my own ears. She didn't look up. "Coworker," she said. "We're planning a team thing." I let out a little laugh that even I didn't believe. "At a same place that he can't wait to see you?" I asked. She froze mid-chop, then turned around with that familiar flat stare. "You're reading messages over my shoulder now?" she said. She didn't answer my question. She just redirected it. She was good at that. Too good. "I just walked by," I said. "Your phone is right there." She sighed, wiped her hands on the towel, and picked up the phone, letting the screen go dark before I could see more. "You're being dramatic," she said. "It's work. You know how it is." I didn't know how it was. I only knew how it felt. And it felt wrong. That night, when she fell asleep with her back to me, I lay there staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding in the dark. The house sounded different somehow, like it was holding its breath. I wish I could tell you I confronted her right then, that I trusted myself enough to demand answers. But I didn't. I did what a lot of people do. I chose the smaller pain of pretending everything was fine over the bigger pain of ripping my life open. Until the laptop. It was a Sunday afternoon. The kind of day that doesn't prepare you for anything dramatic. She said she had to run to the store, grabbed her keys, and left her laptop open on the kitchen table. Normally it was shut, password protected, guarded. That day it wasn't. I don't know what made me look. Maybe it was all the other little signs finally lining up. Maybe it was the silence in the house. Maybe I was just tired of being scared of the truth. The screen was open to her email. At the top of the inbox, bold and unread, was a subject line that made my legs feel weak. "Hotel reservation confirmation, D and L. L. Her first initial, D. The coworker. The message. The late nights. My hands shook as I clicked it. I saw the dates. I saw the hotel name. I saw the words King Room, 2 guests. I saw her name and his name spelled out in full, side by side. Like some cruel joke. My brain tried to protect me even then. Could be a group trip. Could be a mistake. Could be. Then I saw the second email a little further down. From him. "I'm already counting the days. Last time. I can't stop thinking about it. Last time. Not can't wait to meet you. Not looking forward to our conference. Last time." My vision blurred. I felt like I was falling and there was nothing to grab onto. The kitchen, the table, the ordinary sunlight. It all felt wrong. Like I was standing in someone else's house, inside someone else's life. I don't remember how long I stood there. I only remember the sound of her keys in the lock a few minutes later, and the sudden rush of panic as I realized I was still staring at her open betrayal on her screen. I had 2 choices. Close the laptop, pretend I'd seen nothing and go back to being blind, or leave it open and meet the truth head-on. For once in our marriage, I decided not to look away. I stayed where I was. She stepped into the kitchen, grocery bag in hand, humming softly to herself. Then she saw me. Then she saw the laptop. Her humming stopped. We stared at each other across that table, me with my world shattered in silence. Her with a plastic bag of ordinary groceries and an expression that didn't belong to a person who had just been caught. No fear. No stuttering. No flushed cheeks or frantic explanations. Just calculation. She set the bag down slowly. The apples inside bumped against each other with a dull thud. "Did you go through my email?" she asked again, her tone more annoyed than guilty. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside so she could see the screen. Her eyes flicked to it, then back to me. And that was it. That was all she gave away. No denial. No shock. Just that one tiny flicker of recognition. And that brings us back to the living room. Back to the clock. The tea. The quiet war. "Who is Daniel?" I had asked her. Now you know why. She sat across from me, fingers intertwined in her lap, and studied me like I was the one on trial. "Okay," she said. "If we're going to talk about this, then you need to be ready to hear the truth. All of it." I didn't know then that all of it didn't just mean another man. It meant another life. If you're still with me, I need you for the rest of this. Because what came next was darker and more twisted than anything I had prepared myself for. And if you've ever wondered how someone you live with can live another life right under your nose, you're about to see how it happens piece by piece. Stick with me to the next part. And if stories like this help you process your own doubts, your own scars, then don't just click away when this ends. There are more stories, more truths, and maybe some answers you've been avoiding. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a second. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, the calmness in her voice, the way she lied with such purity that it almost made me question my own sanity. I kept replaying the moment she told me she had never met that man. The softness in her tone, the subtle tilt of her head, the way her eyes didn't blink. It wasn't the denial that broke me. It was how effortless it looked for her. By the time the sun rose, something inside me had already shifted. I wasn't just suspicious anymore. I was terrified. Terrified of the possibility that the woman I had married, the woman I had shared a bed with for 10 years, was capable of hiding an entire world behind her eyes. I left the house early, pretending I had an urgent meeting. She remained in the kitchen, sipping her coffee, scrolling through her phone like any other morning. But I watched her from the doorway a little longer. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't distracted. She wasn't tired. She looked strategic, like her mind was somewhere else calculating. And I realized something chilling. She didn't believe I had dropped the subject. She was waiting, watching, predicting my next move. That alone told me she wasn't innocent. I drove around aimlessly until I stopped in front of a cafe near my office. I sat there with the engine running, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked like a man who had begun to drown, and was just now realizing how deep the water really was. My phone buzzed. A message from her. "Did you get there safely?" A normal text, a caring text, but everything felt like a performance now. I typed yes, and before pressing send, I hesitated. Would she analyze my tone? Would she sense my fear? Would she adjust her strategy? I sent it anyway. That same minute, another message came through from an unknown number. "We need to talk. It's about her." My blood froze. I stepped out of the car, looking around as if the sender might be watching me. Nobody seemed suspicious, yet my pulse hammered so hard I felt it behind my eyes. A second message arrived. "I'm not trying to start problems, but I think you deserve to know." I swallowed hard and typed back, "Who are you?" The reply came almost instantly. "Someone who made the same mistake you did." My knees weakened. I leaned against the car. My chest tightened. There was only one meaning behind those words. We agreed to meet in a public place. I chose a crowded park. Somewhere open, somewhere safe, somewhere she couldn't predict. He arrived before I did. A man in his late 30s, tired eyes, posture tense. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He stood as I approached, and just by the way he extended his hand, I knew he wasn't lying. He wasn't exaggerating. He wasn't confused. He was broken, like me. "I'm Daniel," he said. I think your wife and I have been seeing each other." Those words shattered something in me, even though I expected them. Hearing them felt like bleeding from the inside. I didn't speak, couldn't. I just listened. He told me they met 2 years ago, at a hotel conference room. She had introduced herself with a different last name. Said she was single. Said she lived alone. Said she was lonely. Their affair wasn't casual. It wasn't impulsive. It was structured, routine, predictable, strategic. She saw him every Wednesday. Always the same hotel. Always the same hours. She never stayed overnight. Never texted him first. Never exchanged personal details she didn't choose. And she had rules. Weird rules. He looked at me with a mix of embarrassment and fear. She told me I couldn't call her. Ever. Only she could call me. She said she hated unpredictability. He swallowed. Sometimes she would show up and act like I meant something to her. Other times, she just looked through me, like she wasn't even there. My stomach twisted violently. That sounded exactly like her. Cold. Controlled. detached except when she needed to be something different. "How did you find me?" I finally managed to ask. He hesitated. Then he pulled out his phone and opened a photo. My heart nearly stopped. It was a picture of my wife. But behind her, barely visible through the mirror's reflection, was me. A picture taken in our own home. She had been sending him photos from inside our life. Photos where my existence was in the background like a ghost. Daniel lowered his voice. "I thought she lived with her brother or a roommate. But then, I noticed in several pictures that the man in the background seemed to be the same person. Me." He looked at me with trembling hands. "I don't think she just cheated. I think she's living two different identities. Two different versions of herself. And maybe neither of us ever knew who she really was." A realization hit me like cold metal on the spine. She chose him because he wouldn't question her. She chose me because I never suspected her. Two worlds. Two lives. Two versions of the same woman. And both of us, both men, were just pieces in whatever puzzle she had built to hide the truth. I suddenly remembered something that I had overlooked for years. She never spoke about her past. She never mentioned family. She never kept old photos. She never slipped, never contradicted herself. Her entire life before me was a blank page, and now I understood why. Daniel leaned closer. "There's something else," he said. "She told me she was thinking of leaving. Not me, not you." He paused. "She said she was leaving everything, that she needed a reset." A chill ran down my spine so violently that I felt it in my teeth. Leaving everything, including us. Including the life she had built. Including the identity she had crafted. "Do you know what that means?" he asked. I nodded slowly. Yes, I knew exactly what it meant. She wasn't planning to end the affair. She was planning to erase her life. And I had no idea how far she was willing to go to do it. When I got home that evening, she was in the living room, reading a book, her face as calm as still water. "Hi, honey," she said, smiling softly, as if nothing was happening, as if she wasn't preparing to disappear, as if the woman in front of me wasn't a stranger wearing my wife's skin. She tilted her head slightly. "You're quiet. Long day." I stared at her for a long moment, trying to see the truth behind her eyes. But they were empty, not lifeless, no. Worse, unreadable, engineered. And for the first time since I married her, I felt fear. Real fear, because now I knew. My wife wasn't messy. She wasn't clumsy. She wasn't confused. She was deliberate. She was controlled. She was capable of living two lives at once. Capable of vanishing without a trace. Capable of lying to me even while holding my hand. Capable of anything. And the worst part? She knew that I knew. I could see it in the faint smile forming at the corner of her lips. A smile that told me, "You're finally catching up." I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark beside her, watching the rise and fall of her breathing, studying the shape of her silhouette as if I were examining a stranger who had broken into my home. Every sound outside made me flinch. Every time she shifted, my chest tightened. It felt like a countdown had started, and I was the only one who could hear the ticking. Around 3 a.m., I finally stood up, walked out of the room, and sat on the living room floor with my back against the cold wall. My hands were shaking so badly I had to clench them together. I kept replaying the voice messages I'd heard. That man's voice. The sound of her laughter, the one I thought belonged only to us. By morning, I had made a decision. I was going to confront her directly, face to face. No more circling around the truth. No more illusions. But God, I had no idea how deep the truth really went. She came out of the bedroom around 7 a.m., stretching, yawning, acting like nothing was wrong. She kissed my forehead, poured coffee, scrolled on her phone. I watched her fingers tapping the screen, and my stomach twisted. "Rough night?" she asked without looking at me. "Yeah," I answered. "We need to talk." She froze for half a second, too small for a normal person to notice, but not too small for me. "Not anymore." She forced a smile, sat down across from me, and folded her hands. What's going on? You tell me. Her eyes lifted slowly, and the mask she always wore slid perfectly into place. Calm, steady, unreadable. I don't know what you mean, she said softly, and I swear, if I hadn't already known she was lying, I would have believed her. She was that good. I didn't say a word. I simply reached into my pocket, pulled out the pictures I'd found, and placed them one by one in front of her. Her at a restaurant I'd never been told about. Her wearing a dress I had never seen. Her laughing with a man whose face she had cropped out in the versions she kept on her phone. And then the final one, the one that made me feel physically sick. Her hand resting on his shoulder, her wedding ring still on, her eyes looking at him the way she used to look at me. She stared at the photos, and then she did something that gutted me. She didn't deny them. She didn't look away. She didn't cry or panic. She just leaned back in her chair, crossed her arms, and said in a flat voice, "Where did you find these?" That was when I realized something important. She wasn't afraid of being caught. She was annoyed that I had discovered the truth before she was ready to reveal it. She spoke slowly, choosing every word with surgical precision. "They're old. They don't mean what you think. You're blowing things out of proportion. You're imagining a story that isn't there. I wasn't hiding anything. You're just paranoid." Her voice never raised. Her hands never shook. She moved like a chess player anticipating every possible move I could make. I should have walked away. I should have stopped listening. But she had been the center of my life for so long that my mind still wanted to believe her, even as the evidence screamed at me. Finally, I pushed the last piece forward. The voice message. I played it aloud. The room filled with the sound of her whispering, "I miss you too," and then silence. She blinked once, twice, and the coldest smile slowly curved on her lips. "So," she whispered, "you heard that." The air left my lungs. She wasn't devastated. She wasn't apologetic. She wasn't ashamed. She was relieved. She leaned forward, rested her elbows on the table, and said, "You were never supposed to find out this way." My ears rang. My chest tightened. I felt the floor tilt under me. Then she added, barely above a whisper, "And he wasn't the only one." My heart stopped. Those 5 words shattered everything I thought I knew about my life. He wasn't the only one. The betrayal I'd uncovered, the messages I'd found, the pieces I had painfully connected, were only a fraction of the truth. There were others. Maybe recently, maybe years ago, maybe even before we got married. I felt something inside me break. Something I knew would never heal the same way again. She stood up slowly and walked toward me. "It's not what you think," she said, though her tone contradicted her words. "I just needed more than what we had. More. More. For years I gave her everything. Stability, loyalty, affection, trust, a home, a future. And somehow, in her mind, that wasn't enough. Or worse, maybe it was never what she wanted to begin with. The realization hit me like a punch to the ribs. All the nights she came home late, all the moments she was distant, all the times she said she was tired, all the weekends she suddenly needed space. It wasn't stress. It wasn't work. It wasn't exhaustion. It was him, and whoever else she meant by not the only one. I felt like I was dissolving from the inside out. When I finally managed to speak, my voice barely came out. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I asked. She stared at me, expression unreadable. "Because," she said, "you would have left, and that would have been inconvenient. Not heartbreaking, not tragic, not painful. Inconvenient." That was the moment I realized the truth I had been blind to for years. She never loved me the way I loved her. She never saw me as her partner, only as a resource, as stability, as a safety net. And now that I had discovered the truth, she wasn't begging for forgiveness. She was calculating what losing me would cost her. She walked toward the hallway as if the conversation bored her. "We'll talk later," she said. "I have things to do." But something in me snapped. "No," I said. "We finish this now." She stopped, turned, looked at me with eyes that suddenly felt like they belonged to a stranger. And she whispered, "Are you sure you want to know everything? Because once you do, you won't come back from it." I swallowed hard. "Tell me." She smiled. A slow, chilling, almost triumphant smile. "All right," she said. "Then I'll tell you exactly who I really am." And that was how part 3 ends. With the truth about to ignite like a fuse. With the life I knew seconds away from collapsing into something darker than I ever imagined. I don't know how I managed to drive home that night. My hands were shaking so violently on the steering wheel that I could barely keep the car in a straight line. My mind replayed the last 24 hours like a film on repeat, except every time the scene looped, it got darker, heavier, more unbearable. Her second phone, the text messages, her strange calmness when confronted, the undeniable truth that my wife, the woman I had built a life with, had been living in 2 worlds, and I only existed in the one she despised. By the time I pulled into our driveway, a sickening dread settled in my stomach. The house was lit. She was awake. She was waiting. That alone terrified me. I stepped inside, and the air felt different, heavy, thick, almost staged, like she had prepared the room before I got there. She sat at the kitchen table, still wearing the clothes she'd gone out in. Not disheveled, not anxious, perfectly composed, almost too composed. "Sit," she said quietly, no tremble in her voice, no apology, no guilt, just direction. And like an idiot, I obeyed. I sat across from her, and for the first time, I noticed how unfamiliar her eyes looked. Not the woman I married. Not the woman I thought I loved. These eyes were colder, sharper, calculating. "What do you want to know?" she asked. I almost laughed. What didn't I want to know? But her tone had the exact same energy a criminal uses when they're already sure of the plea deal. "You've been lying to me," I whispered. "For how long?" She took a slow breath, calm, unbothered. "For longer than you think." The room spun. "Did you ever love me?" I asked. This time she looked at me, really looked at me, and the pause that followed was worse than any answer. "I loved the version of my life where you fit," she said finally. "But that version stopped existing." My chest tightened. "Because of him?" She didn't deny it, but she didn't confirm it either. And that ambiguity, her silence, felt like watching our entire marriage burn in slow motion. I pressed harder. "You had a second phone, a second life, a second chance," she interrupted sharply. "A life that wasn't suffocating. A life where someone actually listened to me." The words were knives. "So you replaced me?" I asked. "No," she whispered. "You were never the one I chose. You were the one I settled for." I felt that sentence physically. She leaned back in her chair, completely unshaken by the fact that she was crushing me with every syllable. "You want honesty?" she continued. "You weren't exciting. You weren't spontaneous. You lived like everything was predictable, safe, boring. I built a life for you," I muttered. "I tried." "Yes, you tried. I didn't want try. I wanted escape." Her face hardened with something that wasn't anger, wasn't regret, just cold clarity. "And he gave me that." My blood boiled. "Who is he really? Tell me." She tilted her head. "Not your concern anymore. You owe me the truth." She laughed softly, not mockingly, worse, dismissively. "If you knew the truth," she said, "you wouldn't want it." Her answer didn't add up. Nothing did. This wasn't just infidelity. There was something deeper, darker running beneath her words. "Why the secrecy?" I asked. "Why 2 phones? Why the lies? Why all of this?" She stared at me like she was calculating my capacity to understand. "Because you were never meant to see the other side of my life," she said slowly. "You never would have survived it." A chill raced down my spine. Survived it? What did that even mean? Before I could respond, she opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of papers. Not random, not messy, prepared. Contracts, bank withdrawals, travel itineraries, messages printed out. like she had been cataloging a life I never knew she was living. "I stayed with you," she said calmly, "because it was convenient, comfortable, safe, and because walking away before now would have complicated everything." "Everything," I echoed. Her jaw tightened. "He wanted me to cut ties cleanly. No loose ends. No loose ends." The phrase repeated in my head like a threat. "So he knows about me?" Her silence was enough. "And you're planning to leave?" I whispered. "I already have," she said. "You just hadn't figured it out yet." My entire world collapsed. I pushed away from the table, my breath shaking. "You're not the woman I married." "No," she said coolly. "I'm not. And I never pretended to be, not really. You just saw what you wanted to see." That was the moment something inside me broke. Not from anger. Not from betrayal. From the horrifying realization that I had loved a ghost. A hollow projection of a woman who never existed. She stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked past me. "Don't follow me," she said. Then she left. No explanation. No remorse. No closure. Just the echo of the front door shutting behind her, sealing a cage of unanswered questions around my mind. I sat alone at that kitchen table, staring at the stack of documents she left, each one a fragment of her double life. And at the very bottom of the pile, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Something that didn't belong. Something with a name on it. A name I recognized. And suddenly, everything I thought I knew shattered again. Because the man she'd been seeing wasn't a stranger. Not to me. Not at all. A name I recognized. Not just recognized. Remembered. Burned into me. Because the man she'd been seeing wasn't a stranger. Not to me. Not at all. He was my brother. My knees went weak. The air left my lungs like someone had punched straight through my ribs. Suddenly the room felt too small, too loud, too bright. Even though everything had fallen into absolute silence. For a moment I couldn't even speak. My voice wouldn't come out. My brain refused to process it. My brother. The same man who grew up beside me. The same man I once defended. The same man who cried at my wedding and hugged me like he meant it. Her lover. Her secret. Her double life. My wife stared at me, and something in her expression shifted. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't shame. It was relief. Like she'd been waiting for this moment. Like hiding it had been harder than the betrayal itself. I whispered, "Why him?" She didn't look away. "Because he understood me in ways you never did. There are lines you don't expect to hear. Sentences that shouldn't exist in the universe. Words that shouldn't be real because they break something fundamental in the human heart. But she said them. Calmly. Coldly. Like she was describing the weather. I felt something collapse inside me. A heavy, irreversible shift. I asked her, "When did it start?" She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. It wasn't recent. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a life she chose. One she built quietly, deliberately, while standing beside me. "It started before the wedding," she finally said. Her voice didn't tremble. Mine did. "So all these years, you've been lying to both of us?" "No," she said. "I've been trying to live the life I was meant to live. You were just part of the path. Just part of the path. Reduced to a stepping stone in my own marriage." I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. I didn't collapse. I just stood there, realizing the person I had married, the woman I had trusted with my soul, never really existed. She was a construction, a mask, a version of herself created to keep me asleep while she lived another life behind my back. I walked out, not because I wanted to, but because I knew if I stayed, something in me would die that I'd never get back. I drove without seeing the road. My phone buzzed, over and over. My brother calling, texting, begging to explain. Explain what? Explain how long he'd waited to take my place? Explain how he sat at my table, ate my food, laughed with me, all while sleeping with my wife? There is no explanation. There is only betrayal. People think the worst part of infidelity is the moment you find out. They're wrong. The real pain comes later, in the quiet moments, in the empty spaces, in the memories that turn to poison. The real pain is waking up and remembering that the person you loved wasn't real. That your marriage was a story someone else was writing behind your back. That your brother, your own blood, was the character stealing pages out of your life while you were asleep. For weeks, I lived in the ashes of what used to be my world. But eventually, the numbness faded. And beneath it, something unexpected grew. Clarity. Not forgiveness. Not healing. Not closure. Just clarity. The understanding that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones capable of destroying you the most quietly. The understanding that love without honesty is just a performance. And the understanding that losing someone isn't the worst thing that can happen. Never knowing who they truly were is. I don't speak to her anymore. I don't speak to him either. Some betrayals carve a canyon too deep to cross. But I survived. And in surviving, I became someone I didn't recognize at first. Someone stronger, someone sharper, someone who finally knows the difference between loyalty and illusion. And if there's one thing I learned from this, the truth doesn't just set you free. Sometimes, it burns the cage to the ground.